Good evening, everybody. This is the August 1, 2017 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the midsummer meeting. We have to remind you every time we get together that we are recording this, and so be careful what you say. And we always start with a moment of appreciation for our troops who are serving around the world. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're starting out with, well, it says at 7:05, but I think we can just go, is there any reason we can't just go right to that? Yeah. We're going to have the police chief here. We have a new police officer recommended by the police chief.
Good evening and thank you. I mentioned a couple weeks ago when we appointed the two other candidates and gave them conditional offers of employment that I would be coming back, hopefully this meeting, with the third after the background check was completed, which was successfully done. And Katrina Callow is sitting down in the end to the board's left. There is a cheering section in the back and several generations of family and some of the officers and the deputy chief in the back also. A little rundown on Katrina. So, lifelong resident of Medfield, and I just confirmed with the family that yes, she is fifth generation, so she's tied with my gang for 5 generations worth of being here, and it's encouraging to see they haven't asked any of us to leave yet. So I feel good about that. Graduated from Medfield High School in 2007. Graduated from Bay Path College with a degree in criminal justice, cum laude. Very good. Her background pretty much is in security work. Number 3 over at the Natick Mall, in charge of the security over there, currently as a lieutenant. The people over there had very good things to say about her, and as you know, I worked in Wellesley, so I know some of the Natick folks, and the Natick folks, police officers who worked the mall, also had very good things to say about Katrina. So that was good. The other thing that she brings is a conversational ability in Spanish. I will admit at this point that it took me 4 years at Medfield High to get to Spanish 3. It wasn't a very glorious career in Spanish, and I think Sesame Street is the best I can do at this point. But Katrina is not only positive for Medfield, but very often you'll just hear on the radio any of the surrounding towns have someone who can speak Spanish. Very common request. So you may be in demand. We'll see how that goes. The other thing is that Katrina is also a caregiver for a special needs child here in Medfield, which I find very important because a lot of the times law enforcement is getting into difficult situations these days. It's with people with special needs, with challenges and whatnot, and sometimes we're not the best at sorting that out. We are working on that diligently. There's training this year. We're probably going to be doing some local training, but having Katrina, who is already well-versed in that subject and has a wonderful relationship, the family was just very, very good reviews about her. So, with all that, I would ask if you would consider giving her a conditional offer of employment based on the fact that she passes her medical physical and her physical agility test. And we have her perhaps scheduled for the same academy, fingers crossed, as the other 2 candidates who appeared here 2 weeks ago. And if you have any questions for me or for Katrina, please feel free.
Mike, anything?
I have no questions.
I have none either. I'm delighted that you found another candidate. The class of 2007 is filling up your department, I hear.
We're hoping it's a good year.
Oh, I'm sure it is, yeah.
It worked out well so far.
Yeah. So we need a motion.
We need a motion. I would move that we appoint police officer candidate Katrina Callow and extend her a conditional offer of employment conditioned on the conditions that the chief outlined.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
The police force.
Is the chief fully staffed now? Is he up to full, is he up to full troop?
You're fully staffed?
Our next retirement, which will be in about less than a year probably.
But you are at full staffing right now for the first time in a long time, and
Once everyone makes it through the academy, and because truth be known, Mike Solmier, who was one of our recruits who graduated from the State Police Local Academy back in June, started the academy in January, and if all goes according to plan, by September, October, he will be cut loose and will be working the road by himself. So as you can see, it takes 9 to 10 months. It takes 9 to 10 months from the point that they start the academy, not just, you've appointed them. From this point, if they start the academy in October, it could be next June or longer, depending on how everyone does. There's quite a process once you get out of the academy where you arrive with the officer and you basically essentially keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. And then little by little, you're allowed to do some of the work. You're allowed to drive the cruiser. The field training officer then will be in an unmarked cruiser and lets you do the work. And so little by little, the road gets longer and longer and longer, as opposed to, the good old days where you got a badge, a gun, a pair of handcuffs, and go to hit the streets again. So we have a little bit more of a developed program these days that Sergeant Anderson and Officer Manganello are a couple of key components in. We have Officer Brienzi, who's here tonight, who's one of the training officers, and the deputy oversees the whole process. So, but yes, we're getting close. But probably Tom LaPlante will be the next person to retire. That'll be in a year.
Great.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. And so our next item is to discuss the interim fire chief. And who's going to, is that Scott? Scott McDermott, Town Moderator, member of the search committee.
Good evening. So I arrived at the first meeting, and without thinking, I sat at the end of the table, and somehow that led to me being kind of the ad hoc chairman of the fire chief search committee. So, but we met and have met a couple of times, and it became apparent to us that for a number of reasons, including all of the issues that the town is facing, timetables and so forth, that we would be looking for an interim chief. And so we had the opportunity to be able to interview Robert Hollingshead, who was the fire chief in Hull, who retired just a couple of years ago. We spent a good deal of time with him over the last week, Chief Meany and myself and Christine. I'll read you a little bit of a profile. He's an established public service professional with over 30 years of experience in increasingly responsible leadership and managerial roles, focusing on financial operations, including budgeting and grant writing, labor relations, organizational standards and policies, while providing outstanding service to that community. He possesses a deep understanding and appreciation of municipal government from the perspective of an executive, an instructor, an evaluator, and a citizen. And if I can find it, I then wrote a message to the rest of the committee that provided my endorsement to be here tonight. And excuse me for the, and I wrote to the committee that I was very impressed with Chief Hollingshead in our interview last Wednesday. He has deep experience and understanding regarding organizational matters, which are important to us, standards and policies, municipal government, budgeting, and labor matters. He understands the benefits and burdens and, parenthetically, the growing pains of moving to the ALS model, and he has direct experience with the issue over many years in Hull. I believe he would be the type of objective, engaged, service-oriented interim leader who could effectively address the opportunities and challenges facing the department in the months ahead. I want to give my endorsement without reservation from the interview to the committee on making a recommendation to the Selectmen on Tuesday night, tonight, to seek a contract with Chief Hollingshead. And so that's what we're here to do tonight, to ask for the approval of the Board of Selectmen for Christine to be able to enter into negotiations with Chief Hollinshead to be an interim fire chief in the town of Medfield. I think we have a great opportunity to get a really committed public servant. He has all of his hours of availability to be able to serve for the town through the rest of this year and until the time that we would be making the final decision or recommendations, at least to the Board of Selectmen, about a next fire chief. So that's our recommendation. I think Chief Meany endorses that. The committee has all given thumbs up to coming here tonight and making that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that we go forward with your approval for Christine to be able to enter into some discussions with Chief Hollinshead about the opportunity to come to Medfield and serve as an interim chief. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about either the process or about what we know about this prospect, this candidate to be our interim chief, if there are any. And if there are not, I put our recommendation before you.
I would just, in terms of your process of finding a new chief, can you maybe just share with the town what your time frame is, when you expect to have a result on that?
A lot of it had to do with the time that would be available to us to be able to make that decision. And so I think that will be that'll be the key agenda item of our next meeting, because some of it has to do with, getting aligned with the ALS committee and understanding what their time frame is. I think it's been kind of a generally understood in our committee. It would be great to kind of move along with them so that when we are appointing a next chief, that committee would have made some determinations about, what would the force look like going forward, so that we would be able to hire a chief that would have an understanding of what the department was going to look like, and also dependent upon the opportunity to find a possible strong candidate as interim chief who had the availability to be able to participate. The way I understand that it works is that it's on a calendar year basis, so his availability, the hours that he has to be able to serve, would be renewed. So we haven't determined when that would be, but if I were to guess, I would think that we would be looking to do something, in the late winter or early spring of next year. Would be realistic to be able to be asking for, we would be making a recommendation to you of 2 or 3 candidates for you to consider and to interview, and I think that would be a realistic time frame. We have the opportunity to get an objective, outside, highly experienced. I was very impressed with his range of experience. He teaches in a range of courses associated with fire management, fire studies, fire safety, and I think he will provide us a really great year. We had this. 28 years, being blessed by Chief Kingsbury, somebody who, knew the town of Medfield, as intimately as he did. That's really a unique situation for us. But, it's now we move to another era. And I think to have this time frame, whether it's 4 or 6 months, to be able to get an assessment, of the department, to be able to have somebody who could come in who has the experience he is, who could mentor some of the members of the team now, during that time frame, and who also could help us to be able to, maneuver our way through, what is kind of admittedly a consideration of ALS and other key issues, labor issues and so forth with the department. Give us a little time to be able to look at all those issues in a way that will enable us to hopefully find a great chief who will be with us for years into the future. So that would only be, that's just my personal opinion. We didn't get to the point by putting a date, but after having met Chief Hollinshead and knowing how fast the fall will go, I think that we will go through a whole process, by the way, as we did with Chief Meany in 2006, I think, and in which we will be soliciting candidates, we'll be looking for candidates, but ultimately we'll have an assessment center as we did, and all of that takes a little bit of time, including the references and making sure that we're making a good choice as we have in the past. I think that's really the key thing, is to get the right person. So that'll be the determinative of when we're ready to do that. But
has your committee hired a consultant yet?
Not yet. No. We've actually, Christine had had surfaced a couple of proposals from the, the leading groups that do help to consult with committees like ours, and then ultimately would be the ones that do the assessment center, which is a very interesting process for the selection of a chief, but I think it's really a necessary process. So we have a couple of proposals, but we haven't chosen a consultant.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I've got no more questions. Anybody else have questions? Yes, sir. Well, we need a microphone for you, Chief. It doesn't work.
Anyway, just a question was, do you envision this role being a full-time position or part-time? I know there's some negotiation to be done, but will this interim chief be a full-time Monday to Friday?
It's going to be a 4-day position.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will this person have an operational role, or is it strictly administrative?
We're looking at that right now. That's part of what we'll do in the contract negotiation with them.
Okay. So is there a range for acceptable salary for this temporary role?
Christine has reached out to a number of other communities that have hired interim chiefs, and they have provided to her the contracts that they entered into. So
there's apparently a very standard rate for interim fire chiefs.
Who knew?
Who knew? Yeah.
Well, they have a limit, right? I mean, because he's retired, there's a limit to how much he can do and for how long, right? And so your confidence got based on that if you hit the timetable you've suggested late spring, we won't be caught with having to have a second interim fire chief.
No.
Because he's okay.
This is the perfect, actually, the way it worked out, the timing is actually perfect relative to
August,
his availability and what he would be available to be able to provide us, to be able to work within a, a very reasonable time frame.
Okay.
And we did conduct interviews. The committee had identified 3 candidates as potential interims, and 2 of them we had great discussions, or I had great discussions with, but they had maxed out their hours or just accepted another position and were not available till after January 1st. At this point, we can't wait that long.
Okay.
Question?
I know you have some negotiation. Was there an anticipated start date for this?
I'm looking at the 2nd or 3rd week of August.
Okay. Right. And so it sounds like there's a limited number of hours that Monday to Thursday or whatever that 4 days is. So that person would not be responding to calls at night or on the weekends, or?
They'll be available on a 24/7 for major emergencies, but we'll be relying on our existing staff and our deputy chief for other emergencies on site.
Good questions. Other questions?
Any other questions? Yes.
Could you just briefly go over the assessment center for the new chief, what that would entail or what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you my firsthand experience, because I was very involved with the committee that ultimately selected Chief Meany. And that was new to me at that particular time. And so when you narrow through the process, which consisted of reviewing a lot of resumes, and then we interviewed a number of people, then we had second interviews with people. I think we brought in maybe 5 people on a Saturday morning, and throughout the townhouse they set up different scenarios. These are simulated scenarios. They load up an inbox and say to them, okay, you've got 10 minutes to go through that inbox, and then then somebody walks in the room and would say something, okay, what are your priorities? And then they were presented with some considerations in which ethical matters might have been in balance. It required them to kind of think about these situations in order to be able to make a quick recommendation. I'm trying to remember what some of the other factors were, but we moved as a group, as a committee, around to observe in each of these various scenarios. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 of these scenarios, and they were presented under pressure. That was the part of it. I mean, they knew that they were interviewing for the job, and we actually had a candidate who was already a chief in a small community. He had a number of proponents on the committee, and in going through this assessment center, it was very clear that he wasn't the right choice to make when put under the pressure and having to make these decisions in that scenario. So it's I would say simulation, under pressure, in a way that these folks who conduct these are really expert, in kind of pressure testing the candidates, and being able to have us as a committee be able to observe them, in that way was very valuable. So that was what the assessment center consisted of when we were hiring a police chief, and I assume it would be very similar in terms of hiring a fire chief. I mean, the scenarios were real. real kind of case studies, and they orchestrated them for us, and they scored them and graded the candidates through that as we observed this process. They're conducted by former chiefs, so there will be former fire chiefs who will be here, who will be doing some of that evaluation and providing the committee a scoring on that process. It was really good. In fact, I've kind of adopted some of that simulated scenarios in terms of hiring just in the private sector for senior people to put them through the same kind of pressure testing. I thought it was so effective, and it's so revealing, of what you might find, as you go forward. So. Yeah.
And is the role of the committee at this point? It sounds like you'll sort of winnow it down ultimately to a few candidates to present to the board.
Yeah, exactly. I think after we go through this process in terms of Chief Hollinshead, I mean, then the first step would be for us to draft kind of the criteria for the position that we think is appropriate for the town of Medfield, which would then kind of evolve into something that would be some kind of a posting that would get out there, and then we would be soliciting candidates that would submit their resumes. Usually, together with that is some kind of a statement or response to some questions that we might compose. And when that all came in, then we would go through a process of trying to narrow that down to a reasonable number. I don't know what that number is, but it would depend on how many applications we got. We got a lot of applications. This is a very desirable town to come to and to serve in the role of a police chief or a fire chief. So we had a large number, and just by looking at that number, I think we got it down to about 20 folks. And we divided up the committee. We interviewed those, and we narrowed it down to about 10 candidates. And then we had a more intensive interview process, and that led to the 5 people that came in and did the assessment center. And there's other factors going on because these candidates that want to be chief, we're not the only place that they're looking at opportunities, and I think it's not unusual in that search. We had somebody who kind of opted out because he got a promotion in his own department, and then somebody else who opted out because he had another opportunity, that he had been offered, and there was a time frame on that offer, so he had to make that choice while we were going through the process. So some of that dynamic happens, I think, as you're looking at the candidates.
I guess the last question, just in terms of your process, will there be a point where you will engage members of the department for input? Yeah,
that's a really good question. So the last time, and I expect we would do something similar to that, we had a forum where we engaged members of the department, and then we had a more open forum where we engaged members of the community come in and talk about that. And so I think we would do this, the same thing. Yeah. Great.
No more questions? Then I guess we need a...
I would move that we authorize Christine to negotiate a contract with Chief Hollingshead to serve as interim fire chief in Medfield.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Okay, our next item is an appointment at 7:15. Kristen Chind, Library Director, and Michelle Feinsilver, Medfield Garden Club. Continued discussion of request for funding for the Medfield Public Library Rain Garden and Native Pollinator Garden. Thanks for coming.
Hello. Thank you for having us back. I just briefly want to address one of the things that was asked of me to do directly, which was to bring the concept of the rain garden, what we were planning, to the public, which I did. I put it on our Facebook page. I put it on our website. It was shared in lists from other organizations, the Friends Organization, Cultural Alliance. I put out the full proposal. I gave links to the proposal. I asked that they contact me directly if they had any comments. And fortunately, I think I had maybe 7 or 8 positive comments. I didn't have any negative comments. So I just wanted you to know that that was something that I did. Also here tonight to address your other concerns, basically I think about the overflow of the rain garden. We have invited our landscape designer Trevor Smith from Land Escapes, and he's volunteering his time this evening to talk to you because I think he's the best resource we have. So I would like to introduce Trev. Yes, you have to come up here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. So just really brief, very brief, about myself and where I'm coming from. Land Escapes Design Incorporated has been an ecological landscape design company for the past 15 years. Ecological, not because it was trendy, but simply because it's the right thing to do. If you're going to be a steward of the land, you may as well do it properly. One of our missions is to involve and educate professionals and the community in any way, teaching them about ecological landscaping, teaching them about water and stormwater management, and habitat creation. So I was presented with this opportunity to come and take a look at your space there at the library and talk about a pollinator garden and the potential for a rain garden. So that was back in the spring, and we have made our presentation and given some ideas, and I believe that those are up for discussion and that some people have concerns. So I would very much like to address those questions, those concerns, and offer my opinions on the rain garden at the library.
So I'll ask, at the last time this came up, my concern that I raised was whether or not, since as my understanding is we're going to divert the downspout into the rain garden.
Yes, we're going to divert one of the downspouts.
And so my concern was, do we know that in the winter, is the water going to be going out beyond the rain garden onto the sidewalks?
With the current size of the rain garden, in a 1-inch rain event, I've calculated that approximately 600 gallons of water will come down that downspout. The size of the rain garden has been calculated to, it needs to be about 150 square feet at a 6-inch depth to handle that amount of water. I'll get to your winter piece. So the rain garden as it stands is actually a little bit bigger than that, so it can definitely handle more water. The amount of water that is coming down that downspout in the winter, I do not believe will be enough to overflow that space in that rain garden. For what you have in snowpack and then where what you have in thaw, there will not be enough water to overflow that entire area.
So, okay. Did you have any questions, Mike?
Well, I guess my question for Trevor and Kristen is, have you seen the memo from Betty?
I have not.
Okay. I mean, you have. And did you share that with the listservs and the Facebook page as well?
That just came to me this morning.
Okay.
So, no, I did not.
Okay. I mean, from my perspective, I think it would be helpful for you to look at the memo that Betty has put together and pictures and respond to that, because I think that's what, I think this is
I did share that with him. He came with Trevor, he came a little early, and we discussed some of the points that she had brought up in that memo.
because my take on it, again, I'm not a gardener, and I'm can't referee a kind of technical debate on gardening, but I mean, this seems like a serious set of concerns, right? This does not strike me as kind of disagreeing for the sake of being disagreeable. And it points to me as saying, well, if Betty's right, and I can't say she is or she isn't because I don't know anything about gardening, then it sounds like the rain garden's a bad idea, right? It's not just that it would be too much money, it was that affirmatively it would not be the best use for redoing the gardening at the library. If she's wrong, then it's a good idea and we should go ahead with it. But it seems to me that it's a relatively technical question. And not necessarily just a financial one or a question of priorities for the sort of aesthetic of downtown. And so I would like to hear a response or your perspective on the concerns she's
that's why I'm here.
raised.
So I will address any and all points. that
Have you read
would like
you've
to-
read the memo?
I have not read the memo, but you can go ahead and,
Well, I'm not going to read you the memo.
okay, well, I've definitely done this before, so.
Can I recap?
So could I, let me just address a couple things too. I agree that I thought that the points that were raised were serious points, and there was a suggestion that the rain garden was in the wrong place, and that there are better locations for it. We got another, Kathy Suma, who's here tonight, also submitted a letter to us this afternoon saying that as a teaching device, that it might be better if it's in a better place. And there was also a suggestion that that for want of a better term, I guess the current landscaping at the library is basically landscaper landscaping. And that it might be better, or it might be a nice thing for the town of Medfield and for the library to install a landscaping around the whole library that had native plants in it. And that's kind of resonated for me. I thought that was a nice idea. And so my suggestion was going to be that, and it especially seems to work well since, Trevor, since you haven't had a chance to read this, is that for all of you to sit down with Mike or Chris and see if you can't figure out a solution to this. I mean, you're basically asking for, is it $6,000 of town money to do this? And there seem to be some serious issues that are being raised by the Sanders and Kathy Suma. And I would just hope that everybody could sit down and figure out a solution that works for the town, for the library. So that's sort of where I ended up. I like the idea of the native garden. I like the idea of the rain garden. I don't know if it's in the right place or not.
We invited Trevor here.
Can you just use the microphone? Otherwise, the people at home won't be able to hear you, Chris.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work, we found out, so.
All right, Trevor, I have to scoot you over.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. But we invited Trevor here this evening to specifically address the issues that are before us. And I would really appreciate it if we could take a few minutes and just, I have gone over, Betty has outlined, I think, 4 issues, and we've discussed them. If you could just give Trevor the time to speak to those, I think that would be useful. And I think that would...
Sure, I think that's fine.
Okay, and if Betty, if you would like to
he
ask
wasn't ready to
Trevor
speak to
and
them,
bring
but-
up those issues at this time, I think that he could really answer your questions quite well.
Betty, do you want to do a little mini presentation?
I
Or?
don't need to give an opening statement, but I would like to ask.
Sure, why don't you, but if you could just use the microphone up there, because that's apparently the only way people at home are going to be able to hear you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. My first question would be, the rain garden obviously will take care of the rain during the spring, summer, and fall. But sometimes in the winter, we get a heavy snow buildup, and then it gets warm enough, what's on the roof melts, what's on the ground doesn't because it's in shade. That's a pretty shady spot. When the ground is frozen and all that water's coming off the roof, where's it going to go? Because it can't percolate through the rain garden.
Well, I mean, again, it depends, certainly depends on the season, but there is an option to install a downspout diverter if the winter snows and the winter runoff is the major factor. I have proposed the option of a custom downspout diverter, which would allow the gutters to spill into the rain garden during the warm season, and then it would act as a regular, normal functioning gutter during the winter. Again, from my calculations, I did not feel that the runoff would be such that that area would overflow whatsoever.
Wouldn't that be rather contrary to teaching people how to put a rain garden into their own property if they had to also have a dry well and a diverter to take care of it potentially during the winter or early spring months?
Well, we haven't even talked about a dry well yet. The downspout diverter is actually a standard piece of equipment when people are using rain barrels.
I know, I have 4 of them.
Okay, so then you are familiar with a downspout diverter. So a downspout diverter in this situation could absolutely be used as a teaching tool and then could be brought in conjunction with a rain barrel and with the rain garden.
But you're not being a rain garden if you're using a diverter. You're simply putting it down into a dry well, which already exists there.
Correct, but your concern was, the overall concern was, what if during the winter months. So if we want to handle a what if during the winter months, this is a way to take the winter months off the table so there's no longer concern there, and the rain garden will function as a rain garden as is. Now, I know you had a question about the position and the placement of the rain garden. Now, the need for a rain garden right there at the library really isn't one. You do not have to have a rain garden in that area at the library. There isn't a stormwater problem. All the water is handled from the roof. The biggest asset, the #1 reason to put a rain garden in that area at the library is because it's the library. It's an educational center, because it's front and center at the entrance to the library. So between having that and a pollinator garden there, you could very easily bring groups bring groups through, or those with children, those visiting the library will come by, see signage, look at the rain garden, understand what that's about, and hopefully the idea behind the design of the rain garden is to inspire them to incorporate that on their property and show them how easy it is to help soak up the rain and divert stormwater.
But there's a much more appropriate place for a rain garden not 20 feet away on the other side of the gazebo. That is already a natural swale. It's a natural basin that would collect the water. It would be a perfect place to plant those plants, and to have it, it would be no further away from the library for people coming to see the library, and you could do the teaching there without having to have the possibility of water problems, plus the problem of all of the salt and chemicals that are used. I mean, the library, because you have a lot of elderly, you have a lot of children going there, you go there in the winter after a snow or an ice event, the salt can be that thick. You are crunching through the salt to get up that brick to go into the library. That salt ends up in those beds, and that's obvious because anything that the garden club has planted along them has not done well. Even the daylilies haven't done well, and when daylilies don't do well, you know you're...
I'm not 100% familiar with the area that you're talking about. I'm assuming by the gazebo,
Nancy Tella has Nancy, if you could just...
I actually wanted to address that because I have...
Nancy, can you just use the microphone too? You guys are going to have to share the microphone.
I did want to address that because that was one thing that sort of jumped off the page to me when I read it. In theory, that actually would be a perfect place because of the way it's a bowl shape, that swale that she's talking about. In reality, it actually is not a perfect place because anyone who spends time at the library knows that that's a site that is used very actively by families. We do municipal events there. There's theater, there's concerts, people have picnics there. So it really would actually be obstructionist to people's use there.
Well, it would hardly need to take up that entire grassed area. It would only be the small part at the front closest to the bottom of that swale.
It would definitely interrupt the use of it.
I would have to say that while the topography suggests that that would be a pretty good place for a rain garden, the fact that a storm drain already exists there somewhat defeats the purpose.
But a storm drain already exists on the site you want to use. You've got to cut it, get rid of it, move it. And so how could it be a problem that there's a storm drain there?
Well, the difference between the storm grate over there and the downspout, I mean, it's very different situations. Collecting water from one downspout for educational purposes and to kind of show an example, and having that storm drain which collects all the water that ends in that area. I mean, if the idea was to move the garden over there, or as I had said in a previous conversation with Kristen and Michelle, that if the rain garden that we are designing in the current proposed area needs to take on an industrial look, or if we have to apply industrial measures, for instance like beehive caps and overflows of the such, then it really defeats the purpose, because the idea is to show the homeowner how easy it is to redirect your downspout and contain that water before it runs off into the streets.
But there would be no reason to have any overflow problems because that is already deep enough to contain the water.
Correct, and that area would never hold water as a rain garden is supposed to in the first place, which is it just becomes a moot point. I'm just saying, if that's the area to go, then it's pointless to use that area. And I asked the question at my initial consultation and was told the same thing, that green is used for all sorts of town events. So I mean, I applaud your idea, because I had the same idea, but it definitely sounds like it's a town space.
The second question I have that's really a big question is about the way you plan to plan it. And I would like to ask Kathy Suma to approach that, or to handle that. Kathy is, and I'm going to mess up your title. Well, Kathy is a professor and provost at Wellesley College, and she has had a lot of experience, not just as a teacher of college students, but also dealing with younger groups, and she is going to address a couple of those things for us.
Did you mention that she runs the College Science Center?
My name's Kathy Suma. I live in Medfield for about 4 years now, and I'm the director of the Science Center at Wellesley College. I'm a geoscientist by training, and I've done some hydrogeology along the way. My concerns are really as an educator. In part, why would we undo some infrastructure that the town has already done to do something new here at this garden? I agree that the storm drain in the spot that Betty proposes is not, it's equally problematic to undoing what we've already done to manage the stormwater runoff at the library site. So from my perspective as an educator, if we want to get more people involved in learning about how a rain garden works, I wonder why we don't look to a site where we can engage the community broadly in a long-term ongoing project at one of our local schools and get the kids involved. It could still be sponsored by the library because there are libraries at schools and lots of different ways that we can approach education more broadly. I have other concerns about the plan to kind of overplant the garden to start to show a finished product, because from a perspective of ecological stewardship, one wants to create a site that has deep roots that can withstand and be drought tolerant more. I mean, that's why we're talking about a native or pollinator garden. And I think that overplanting that site to show a finished product creates difficulties in the plant community being sustainable in the long term. And it creates difficulties as a learner. If I want to know about how to make a garden, I see what the finished product looks like. When I go put mine in, it doesn't look that way. And so I think, I screwed up somehow. What did I do wrong? I would much rather see this garden evolve over time to help me understand how long it's going to take, what steps I have to follow, and how I can watch that garden grow in time. How do I know what plants are best suited for the deepest part of the depression versus the edges? How do I learn about plants stacking up? So I'm a geoscientist, not a plant person. We step on plants to look at the rocks. So, but if I'm thinking about a rain garden, how do you design that in such a way that you think about how these different plants grow and fill out that space?
Absolutely.
Right?
I'm 100% with you on that.
And so I worry about this idea of producing a final product garden. It's almost duping the public, duping the citizens in terms of...
I agree. I hear what you're saying. I know exactly where you're going. And really, the final product part of this garden is the fact that we are using larger plants. Rather than starting with plugs, we're putting in larger plants to start. So the garden does look like something in the beginning. As far as overplanting, I would argue that it's not. It's definitely heavily planted. I am a plants person, but I am also a soil geek. So I do have some love for the rocks. So
rocks have soil.
Yes. So my feeling there is overplanted is debatable. Large plants being used, definitely, and that is to kind of give it that instant look because it is in front of the library. The heavy plant material cuts down on the maintenance. The choice of plant material does do, as you were saying, with the roots. We have different plants with different root depths that can all work within that area. But by heavily planting, you cut down on the weeding and ultimately the need for excessive mulching, etc. because you don't have that exposed soil.
Right. And then those plants compete with one another for space. And therefore don't have as strong a root bed, a root density, to be able to withstand the salts, withstand droughts like we had last summer, et cetera.
And if the area were overplanted, then the plants would compete.
Yeah.
There is a little bit, you're absolutely right, but there is a little bit of a misunderstanding, because if you look at the forest is extremely dense with all sorts of plants right on top of each other, and it does really well. So the thought that you can't have plants really next to each other or in close proximity to each other, isn't necessarily the case. And when you're creating communities. Now, this idea of the amount of plants in the area is real simple. If the general consensus is there's too many plants, we can take some out. If I've suggested 9, you can put 6. You could put 2. It really doesn't matter. I was asked to supply a list with plant numbers that I thought would be good for this area. That, out of all the problems that we've discussed, is real easily fixed. You can just take some off, and that saves money, and that saves time, and that saves everything. And that's the easiest thing we could do.
Right.
So I do hear what you're saying. I think overplanted is a matter of opinion, but that's also the easiest thing to fix, as far as this whole thing is concerned.
Would you talk about using it as an educational tool with children?
There's a question here.
I'm not for or against the rain garden. I just wanted to speak to the point of it being near school, because I'm a very proud 3rd grade grandmother. And last fall, I participated in the 3rd grade's Thanksgiving dinner. And in the spring at Wheelock School, the 3rd graders plant their victory garden for next year's 3rd graders. And people who are in the Master Gardener program help there to volunteer, and is a huge success. My grandson now knows how to peel carrots, which is wonderful. But he also knows how to spread mulch. He was part of an effort to plant the things. So I just think that if you've done it, it's just a great opportunity to do it by the schools, because the kids they're like sponges when it comes to working outside and learning about this.
Absolutely.
It's one of the best events in Medfield.
Yes.
Yep.
And to speak to the schools, I support that. It's something that Land Escapes gets involved with often. And if Medfield wants to put a rain garden in at a school, call me. I will help you design it. I will be right there to install it with you. And I will be more than happy to work right next to a kindergartner, teaching that person how to plant. And you can bring me a middle schooler, and I will teach that person all about how a rain garden works and hydrology from the building, etc.
I would like to make another suggestion, which is that, Mike and I are both attorneys, and we're used to both sides of a case sounding really logical and good, and having to make decisions between the two. But this is a difficult forum for us to work through all of these issues, and I think it would be much better if you folks would get together with either Mike or Chris or whoever they think is the appropriate person to do it, and see if you can't work out something that works for everyone. It sounds like I'm hearing good ideas on both sides. I don't know what the solution is off the top of my head. I can make a decision, but I would much rather that all of you try to get together and work it through. Yes, Chris? That's our new audience mic now.
Can I ask, is this an issue with funding, or is this an issue with the permission to put a rain garden in?
Well, as I understand it, you're asking for funding, so that's a yes there. I don't know who controls that land. Do the Board of Selectmen control that site or not?
Yes, I believe the Board of Selectmen, well, yeah.
So if the selectmen don't, well, Park and Rec might maintain it, but it's still probably, it might be under the purview of the selectmen. I think the gazebo area is under the selectmen, but I don't know about that particular site.
That
Trustees, the land adjacent to the library is trustee land.
Well,
Library trustee land.
when the town acquired that land from St. Edwards, that was the site of where the rectory was. So it would be included as part of the St. Edward's property. So that would lead me to believe that it would be under the Selectmen's jurisdiction. I know the gazebo is, but now did that change when the addition to the library was put up? I'm surrounded by lawyers, so I'll let them go to it, because they...
Only one of them's going to be able to help you with that question, though, Mike.
So I guess my question is, do we need permission from the selectmen to put a rain garden in there, regardless if we're asking you for funds or if we're going to a private funder?
And I guess the answer to that is we don't know.
I think you have to determine who has the care, custody, and control of the particular area.
And what would that take to find that out?
Researching probably town meeting records.
Okay.
Maps, deeds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's something that's kind of important to determine, because using town funds, I understand, can be problematic. I think that we could get funding elsewhere for this project. I feel that it's very important. I think it's important to have them at schools, and that would be great as well. But public libraries, you go home, you Google libraries and rain gardens, and long as your arm, there's a list, and they're doing great things. And yeah, it's not necessary because, you know, we have the infrastructure in place, but it is a great learning opportunity. Every time you walk by that rain garden, it's there in your face. And it isn't just the elementary school kids. It's going to be seniors. It's going to be teenagers. You know, if we don't start to adopt these practices in our everyday life and teach it as something that is the norm and not the exception, then these kids don't even have a future. And that is where the public library comes in, as being that place that has the resources to talk to everyone. So I would be interested in getting permission to put the rain garden in and seek funding elsewhere.
Well, I mean, the question of who controls the land, Mark, will you look into that and give us an answer next time?
If there is an answer. I mean,
if there is an answer, right.
So it's a relatively simple fix. It's a town meeting action to transfer property from one municipal use to another by a 2/3 vote, so.
Right. But let's just see what the answer is, right? Because it seems to me, on the funding question, and which is certainly within our jurisdiction, I mean, the question that I want the answer to is if the idea, we all kind of agree it would be great to do some sort of educational, environmental, ecological, landscaping, gardening project at the library. And I think towards the end of Betty's memo, she has some other suggestions that might be done instead of this rain garden. I don't know if that's better or worse. And so the question for me is, what is the best educational, ecological, landscaping / gardening educational thing you can do at the library that will be sustainable, that will last, that will be successful, that will improve the overall downtown? And I don't, for a second, I'm not going to say you're wrong and that you haven't picked the best one. But that, to me, is what the question is. And so if the funding question comes back, that's the question I'm going to want to have answered. Now, if it turns out legally that you don't need our permission, well, you don't need our permission. You can go ahead and do it, and best of luck, right? And then we're out of it, right? You only need to come back if you need money. And if you find the money elsewhere, it's always great when we don't have to spend taxpayer dollars on something. It's wonderful when you can avoid that. It's $6,000 we can spend someplace else. But that's really the question, right? And so I don't think that's why I said at the beginning, this is a technical question. You know, it's not a philosophical question, right? It's really a technical question about, we're going to, just from the financial, if we're going to put $6,000 into something at the light, what's the best thing we can do there that's going to be a success in the long run? I can't answer that. And I would agree with Pete if you all could sit down and talk, but if you want to go ahead and do it, and if it's not within our jurisdiction, then it's, we've probably had 2 hours already on this so far, and if we don't have anything else to do with it, then
kind of taken on a life of its own.
I think that real concerns have been raised about it, and that's what's supposed to happen in local government. when people have an interest in an issue. So I think I'm happy to take it up again if we do have to decide this, but if you all could talk and work through as many of the technical issues as we can, and you can narrow the areas of disagreement so that if we do have to make a decision, we can at least be making it on 2 areas of disagreement as opposed to 10.
There's another significant issue which I alluded to the last time that needs to be addressed. I don't know what the gentleman behind me's qualifications are, but that is in addition to the library of relatively recent construction. Part of that was site drainage. There were calculations done. There were engineering addressed to how to handle the stormwater coming off the roof. So there is an existing system in place. You really need somebody with the proper credentials to run the calcs and determine if you're going to substitute something that it's capable of doing whatever is the status quo is right now, and not make it create a situation where
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. Thank you. Yep. Neil, could you just use the audience microphone? Thank you.
I guess I have a question for Kristen. You would like to build a rain garden at the library. At the end of Betty's 5-page letter, so it's you have to get to it in a while, she raises the question that the library sends an educational message, whether it wants to or not, and that at present, the educational message that it sends, when you look at the west landscaping of the library, and particularly the south landscaping of the library, is that things like invasive plants don't matter, natives don't matter, and is there any circumstance under which you could be persuaded that a better use for all of the energy that we're putting into this would be to take the landscaping on the west side and the south side and turn it into something that would be beautiful, native, no more swallowwort, no more dead shrubs, and do that instead of a rain garden, and do a rain garden at a different time and at whatever is the best location.
And I think that's a discussion that I'm encouraging you guys to have, but just not right here, because it's hard for us to solve it here in this forum. It cries out for doing it over lunch or something or somewhere else. I mean, we do mediations and settle all kinds of cases, and this sort of cries out to just have someone help you mediate through and get to, because there's obviously a lot of agreement, there's a lot of good ideas, and so that, please.
No, I appreciate your time, and we will talk and decide our next path. But I do agree that too much time has been taken for this particular issue. I just wanted a nice garden that would educate people. I never anticipated any kind of pushback to this degree. I understand that conversations are important. I don't know where a lot of this is coming from, but I feel that, well, personally, it's just kind of taken the wind out of my sails.
Well, don't get discouraged by it, because I mean, obviously you have a very good idea for an educational rain garden. I think that in my mind, the native plantings around the library, I thought was a very interesting idea as well. So I encourage you guys to get together and talk about it. If it would help to talk with Mike or Chris or someone from the townhouse, I encourage you to find somebody that can sort of be the mediator. I think that would be helpful.
And the maintenance of the shrubbery and all that around the library, I don't bring my pruning shears with me as a rule, so I haven't been out there hacking away.
Yeah.
But I do agree that, yes, it could look better. I don't know personally how to make that happen. So I guess that would be a conversation to have with Mike or Christine.
And I think that, I think that your landscaping is probably balled in with all of the other town building landscaping that's done by Shady Tree on an annual contract.
Right, yes.
And so if you wanted something different than Shady Tree knows how to do, obviously it would have to be.
It's actually done by Park and Recreation on their own in-house staff.
Oh, okay. It used to be Shady Tree, and I just.
Right, okay. All right, so.
But that would probably make it easier to get the town to get what they want if it's town employees who are doing it, so.
Right.
Perhaps the first step would be to train some of the library volunteers that you have to go out and do some work on those, because it's disgraceful to see all of that invasive around the library.
I'm not sure that
And town
So,
buildings.
Betty, we're agreeing to talk about this
Yes, I
further.
understand that, but I'm
And what
saying
you're
that
doing
we
is you're
gotta
you're lobbing things now, Betty. Please
No, I'm
don't
not.
do
I'm
that.
saying we need to start
Please
with
stop.
what's
Please stop now, right now. We're done with this discussion. We're moving on.
May I just say
Thank
one
you for
thing?
coming, Trevor.
Thank you very much.
And I encourage you guys to get together and talk about it in a civil way, please. And I encourage you to seek out either Mike or Chris to help you with that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I said asking me would be like asking me to decide whether Steve Jobs or Bill Gates is right on a technical issue.
It's, yeah, you don't always have to know the details of the matter to mediate something. So we're up to our citizen comment moment. No one signed in, so we're not going to have citizen comments again. Or we're not going to have citizen comment under the citizen comment section. So under our action items, we've got Maurice Goulet, Director of DPW, requests the Board of Selectmen to sign all SER SG DPW supply contracts previously voted to award.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Pretty sad.
This is the consortium that we joined. You've now voted this. You voted to join the consortium. You have voted to award all of these contracts, and now you have to vote to sign them. This is the first year we were doing this, and I talked to Maurice. I think to expedite this next year is that you will vote to award them and authorize him to sign them so he can sign them as soon as they come in. You don't have to fill up your agenda with signing each one. So now that we've gone through the first year, we'll know the process for the second year. So I apologize, this made your agenda 3.5 pages, but.
Well, we're saving money by doing it, so it's worth learning.
So each one does have to be signed. Just on an interesting note, we did place our first paper order with WB Mason under this new contract, and on the first order alone saved over $200.
Excellent.
So definitely worth all the signing.
So do we need a motion, or do we just need to sign this afterwards?
You need a motion to sign
All
them.
right, so I would move that we sign all the SER, SG, DPW supply contracts that we previously voted to award.
Second, any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
All right.
Why don't you just put as identified on the agenda?
As identified on the agenda.
All in favor? Yep.
Yep, all right.
Next item is Maurice Goulet, DPW Director, requests the Board of Selectmen to sign a Chapter 90 reimbursement request for North Street redesign in the amount of $3,689.50.
You recall when Mo was in, he mentioned that because of the length of time since the project was originally designed, some of the standards has changed, and when they met with the Mass DOT people in Worcester, they asked them to update the original design plans to incorporate the new standards in them. So this is reimbursable under Chapter 90.
So I would move that we vote to sign the Chapter 90 reimbursement request as requested for the North Street redesign in the amount of $3,689.50.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Next, Director Goulet requests the Board of Selectmen vote to sign a one-year contract with EOMS Recycling, Inc., West Bridgewater, for collection services of recycled food waste. Attorney Sorrell reviewed and approved. Thank you, Mark.
If you've been to the transfer station recently, you'll see those containers at the right-hand side of the windows. There's 4 of them, and they collect garbage. And it's been paid for with a state grant. That state grant expired June 30th. So now the ZAR committee, Transfer Station Recycling Committee, is going to pick up the cost out of the $4,000 that was allocated for them in the budget. I believe it's about $171 a month. Please? 172? Well, I was close. Okay.
Well, that's about 171.
Oh, that's outrageous there.
It's about 171 or exactly 172. Right?
On Jeopardy, I was under, so I still win. Or what's that? One of those programs. I still win, yes. If I was over, I would lose.
Price is right.
All right. Well, I would move that we vote to sign the one-year contract with EOMS Recycling Incorporated.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Vote to accept and sign acceptance plans for portions of Eric Road Extension and Quarry Road Extension.
Deja vu all over again.
Yes.
I think this goes back to the pyramids, I think, so it started, when this issue started.
Just to clarify, you're not signing the plans, you're signing the acceptance to the deed and grants of easements.
Right. Well, I would move that we accept.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
I didn't hear what that was all about. Speak a little louder.
Sure.
It's
What's that?
it's the acceptance of Eric Road Extension and Quarry Road Extension.
In Woodcliff Hills.
This was an article on the warrant for the town meeting. The town meeting voted, so this is to implement that. Yep.
Please.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I would move that we accept and do I need you to sign or just accept?
Accept and sign.
So I would vote that we accept and sign plans for portions of the Eric Road Extension and Quarry Road Extension.
I'll second
Accept
your...
the deed and grants of easements.
Accept the deed and grants of easement
Right.
for portions of the Eric Road Extension and the Quarry Road Extension.
Right.
And I'll second your motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Sarah,
Will you be back to have us sign them?
They're over there, and in Evelyn's absence, I'll notarize your signatures, so acknowledge that you're signing as your free act and deed as a Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely. Sarah,
Notary?
Of course.
Sarah Reposa, Town Planner, requests the Board of Selectmen to authorize Michael Sullivan to sign grant proposal to MAPC for technical assistance for cultural asset mapping.
This is a program the MPC has, and they needed a certain number of communities to participate, and they've asked us to participate. There's no cost to the town. They will map sites of historic and cultural importance in Medfield, and they will put them on the MAPC website so that tourists or visitors the area that want to know what might be interesting to see in Medfield can look it up.
All right, so I would move that we authorize Mike Sullivan to sign the grant proposal to the MAPC for technical assistance in cultural asset mapping.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Discussion and appointment of Veteran Service Officer. Mike?
Yes, we now have 2 applications for Veteran Service Officer, and Christine said there might be 3. Did you get a third
I
one?
just received it in the last 10 minutes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Third one as well.
And Gus is not here. He did send some comments in that I couldn't release to you because of the open meeting law. But so I think it's probably the best is to just put it on the agenda for the next meeting and decide how you want to handle, whether you people want to interview or whether you want to have the personnel board conduct the interviews or how you want to handle that. So
I mean, one suggestion I would make is with respect to each of the candidates. I mean, the question that we have for any of the VSO candidates is sort of the other stuff that they're going to do to sort of fill out the full-time job. And so if you could put some thoughts together on each candidate, because I think at least for me, that would be a factor in deciding which way to go, is where are we going to get the most additional assistance that we would need it in the town, assuming that all 3 of them are competent and capable of doing the basic VSO tasks. Sort of a deciding factor will be what else is that person going to do on top of that.
I did talk to the assessors because they've been funded for a half-time position this year. So I talked to Yvonne in their office, and she indicated they were not interested in combining it with the Veteran Service Officer.
Would not?
Would not.
Okay.
So I don't know, Tom, are you?
Yeah, I talked to her today, and the candidates that I saw, and I reviewed all the resumes, and none would be, it's not a good thing. What happens there, and I can see what happens, is, the veterans really need a person that they can come in and talk to. And we're the target, everybody comes in that door, they head for the assessor's office. And, I've had veterans come in there before looking for assistance, but we're not there. A lot of times they can't even want to get bait. And we have to sit down. If they have the veterans agent, like Ron was, he explained them and he kept it rolling. But, wastes a lot of time in that assessor's office, really does. So, I would never combine those 2 positions.
And I suspect that's what you're going to find. Everybody is, if you give them extra help, they'll take it. But if you want to combine it with existing duties, they're not interested.
No, I think it will be not to replace somebody who's there, but to do additional work that is probably wouldn't be worth doing on its own, but it's still helpful to the town. I mean, that you wouldn't necessarily hire somebody for that position, but there is work to be done, right? I mean, I know with one of the candidates, they thought he could provide some assistance on the building side, where there might be some help available, or on a project basis for things going forward. I mean, it really is looking at what are the kind of things we're going to have going on in town over the next few years where we could use some additional assistance from one of these folks. Recognizing that their primary role is going to be as the VSO, but will fill out the rest of their time doing some of this other stuff, you know, a 3-2 basis or whatever it will be. That's my thinking of it.
The main expression I've been hearing so far seems to be in the social work area, and we already have a number of social workers in the town between the schools, the outreach, and the Council on Aging. So whether we want to beef that up even further is I think something you have to think about.
And I did, I think I sent you my notes of my call with Roberta Lynch today, and she said she had misunderstood about the offer that was being made. She thought that she was having to give up her social worker's time, and she wasn't willing to do that. She's absolutely willing to accept additional help beyond.
Well, that was my point. Everybody's willing to take more. But, you know, at what point can you keep hiring people just because they can find something for them to do?
I don't think that's the question of whether they have something to do. I think that they're telling us that they have a need. But, you know, I mean, obviously you can challenge that if you want. I mean, maybe that's just their attitude. But we've heard from both the youth outreach and from the Council on Aging that they do have a need, so.
And I think the reality is we're not, you know, we have to hire a VSO, right? We're not just going to not fill the position. So if we're starting from the perspective we have to hire a VSO, you're adding another person. And so, I mean, Ron has made it clear it's not a full-time job. And we want to make it a full-time, meaningful job in addition to the important VSO services. That's what we're doing. We wouldn't hire somebody just to hire them because there's other stuff to do, but we have to hire someone. And so if we have to hire someone, of whatever percentage of that person's time is not going to be needed for the VSO, where else do you slot them in? That, to me, is the question in town. And it may be, in the social work area, there may be another area where the help is more needed, and we should look for a person who could fill in that spot, where taking the load out of somebody else.
And that's what I thought. One of the applications, he had some experience in real estate, so I thought it might work in the assessor's office, but apparently not.
I went in deep and I found out that's what I'm not. I wouldn't do it. Wasn't capable of doing what we do. Just because you've got a real estate license or you're in the real estate business, you've got to have a little more depth. A lot of guys are at the state there that you can. I don't know the thing out at the state, but there's people starting to retire there to take on a position like that.
Yeah, well, it depends on whether they can be trained too. I mean, there's some people that might not have the necessary experience, but
we got to get a tax bill out. That's the thing, and that person there is vital to us. We've got things that have to be done. It's a process every year. It's not. We do it cyclical, and it has to be done. If you want to get a tax bill out, you got to get that person. That person is vital to that department.
Thanks, Tom. Next, we're accepting the resignation of Fred Bunger from the Medfield Energy Committee. Fred's moving to Wellesley. It's a big loss for the town. He was excellent at the Energy Committee. And
there's another big loss there, too. You're going to have Margie. He's going to be leaving
from the Energy Committee, yes.
He's another big
he's
mainstay on that committee.
Very knowledgeable man.
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust appointments. We're asked to vote to appoint final Affordable Housing Trust member. The Planning Board has nominated Jim Brand, one of their associate members of the Planning Board. Any discussion?
No, I mean, I'm glad that they nominated someone. I think given the role of the Planning Board in the process, the importance of the board, you know, I'd be inclined to appoint their nominee. Jim seems qualified. I mean, I think I would have been perfectly happy with the existing people that we had as well, but, and I did reach out to Jerry Potts today to let him know that that's would be my perspective on this. I think Jerry would be great, but I think if the Planning Board has put forward a nominee, we ought to appoint that nominee.
I agree with you. I think that Mr. Brand seemed eminently qualified, given his professional background. And we did ask the planning board to nominate somebody, so I think that I'm prepared to go ahead and vote on their nominee. I think we were fortunate that we had so many highly qualified candidates for that committee, and I hope that the people that were not able to be appointed would still go to the meetings and try to participate and
Or find another way to help on many of the other boards and committees that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah, whatever.
Sometimes it's a challenge to find people to serve on. So,
Yep.
so I would move that we appoint Mr. Brand to the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees, and hopefully he's already knows the first meeting is on Thursday, and we hope to
what
see
time?
him 7 o'clock at the Public Safety Building. So,
Here.
oh, it's now here.
You're here, yes.
Oh.
We're here.
So both times I've said it, I've been wrong. First time I said it was here, and then it was the Public Safety Building. Now, okay, so it's here on Thursday.
How are you gonna make me double check?
Why don't you double check what the notice says and let me know, Christine. But I had thought it was the Public Safety Building.
If,
Yes, and now EDC is canceled, so we're here.
Still good for here.
We're here.
So I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Resignation letter from Tracy Mitchell, Trust Fund Commissioner, due to his moving from Medfield. That's a longtime person.
So will that be a special election?
no, it's, yes, it is an elected position, so it will be, yeah.
So maybe we could reach out to the various candidates we've had for the committees that we've appointed this summer, let them know that we have a vacancy on the Trust Fund Commissioners, and if they're interested, we can have a special election to elect to fill out Mr. Mitchell's term, and then they'd have to run in the regular election in March. So.
We've already discussed the interim fire chief. Next item is Jerry McCarty, Facilities Director, requests the Board of Selectmen award bid and sign a contract for the Town Hall roof repair to Stanley Roofing Company in the amount of $42,500.
The only question I had about this, I'm assuming that this money is coming out of the appropriations that have been done over time in the capital budget
Yes.
for the town hall roof.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's previous town meeting appropriations.
And this year, there was 20,000, was it, or last
In
year?
prior years, yeah.
Last year, was 20,000, and about
For several
3
years,
ago.
Yeah,
yeah.
one year I think we had 10, but
Yeah.
yes.
Been building up to it. So I would move that we award the bid and sign the contract with Stanley Roofing Company in the amount of $42,500.
I'll second.
He also is having the roof at the gazebo replaced too, so it's under a separate contract, and that was
Next one, I think.
the bid level's thought.
It's the next line.
Oh, next line, yeah. Okay.
I'd second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Director McCarty requests the Selectmen vote to sign contract with One Way Painting and Roofing, Inc., Lynn, Massachusetts, in the amount of $8,500 for replacement of the gazebo roof.
And he's coordinating that, so it won't interfere with the Thursday night concerts, so.
And same question there. I mean, where is this appropriation coming from?
I believe that's coming from the, his budget,
Facilities budget.
yes. Yeah.
So I would move that we sign the contract with One Way Painting and Roofing Incorporated in the amount of $8,500 for replacing the gazebo roof.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Then we've got,
It's required.
Yeah, it's required, yeah.
we've next got a couple items that are Selectman Murby's matters about Medfield State Hospital and town goals, and my suggestion on this was going to be that we hold them until Gus gets back.
I was hoping we could talk about him while I wasn't here, Pete.
You can do that if you want.
No, I agree, and I'll try to jot down some notes of my own in advance of the 15th, so that's fine by me.
Under licenses and permits, Gene Minio requests a permit for a one-day wine and alcohol license and permit to hold dinner in the field atop the Medfield State Hospital sledding hill on August 26,
Is that a beer and
2017, 5 to 9.
Beer, it's a beer and wine. Should be beer and wine.
A wine and malt beverage permit?
Beer and wine.
Will the parking
I
be,
mean, I'm sorry.
yeah. Is this going to interfere with the filming up there?
No, Gene and I have worked together, and it's
Worked it
going to
out.
take place on a Saturday evening, so that it will not interfere with the filming.
Okay, good.
And the singers will sing away from the
Yes.
No open bottles of
hospital
Jack
grounds.
Daniels.
And I did meet several times with the police chief today, and he had no issue with it as well.
Okay.
So under our So I will, under our policy, can we move the whole consent agenda at once?
Yes, you can.
All right, so I would move that we approve all of the licenses and permits listed on the consent agenda, including the requested permit for a one-day wine and malt beverage license and permit to hold the dinner in the field atop the MSH Sledding Hill on August 26, 2017, 5 to 9 p.m.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
So that covers everything on there. Great.
Correct.
Town Administrator update. Discuss the recent meeting with John Kelly, the developer of the proposed 40B on West Street. Not West Street, Dale Street, sorry.
Yeah, they have requested another meeting with town officials. They claim they've revised their plan and they are willing to keep revising it. When I talked to Sarah, she didn't feel it was necessary for all the departments because it's very preliminary stage that you don't need, you know, a lot of officials, the library director and, you know, probably the police department at this stage, because it's more a discussion of design rather than other issues. But I thought it was important at this stage to involve either the Affordable Housing Trust Committee or the Board of Selectmen or both. Now, if you're on the Affordable Housing Trust, you're both. On the other hand, Pete's chairman of the Selectmen, so if you both decide to go, then we'll have to post the meeting. So we need to know a few days in advance if both of you plan on attending. If one of you is attending,
So this is, you're proposing a new meeting with him?
They're requesting a meeting.
Oh, they're requesting a meeting?
They're requesting, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They reached out, I guess Mr. Kelly met with Mike, but their consultant was in touch with Jay Talaman, Attorney Jay Talaman, and he reached out to all of us to advise us of that fact. So they're taking multiple approaches at this point.
So I'm happy to go. I'm happy to have you go, Pete, if you'd prefer. I mean, is this an August meeting, a September meeting? What's the?
We haven't set it up. We wanted to know what, you know, because you would be the ones that would obviously be most difficult for your schedules. So we want to know who's going, and then Sarah will work out a schedule for when they can come. They wanted it this week. I said last week, and I said, no way, the selectmen aren't meeting until Tuesday. So
I mean, I could do it Friday of this week.
I mean, frankly, they're looking for something that the selectmen would support or at least not oppose. So.
Right. Has anyone driven them by the state hospital property?
Or talk to them about numbers that are more reasonable than
other locations in town other than the one they.
The only ones that are really the two lawyers and Mike are the only ones having any contact, and having received no direction or instructions, we're not communicating anything to them at this point.
No, well, actually, Sarah's been the one that's had the most contact with them.
But she's not doing anything as well because, you know,
we're
hearing from them that they've revised what they had down, where they designed it differently, and that they're willing to do more. They understand that we're at safe harbor for the time being. They're looking to do something going forward. So it's a determination, yes, no, maybe, whatever. So
my standard is always Prentice Place. I mean, Prentice Place is probably 7 units an acre. It's very dense for Medfield, but it looks fine to my eye. I don't mind it at all. And if they could do something like that at that sort of look, I wouldn't mind it.
Have you seen their newest design?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't think they could improve upon the last one, but they managed.
Yeah, so I'm happy to go to the meeting. I mean, I certainly would encourage them to look at other locations. I mean, they could do something that's closer to what they want to do at other places. I mean, they've sort of boxed themselves into a corner by saying they want to put all of these units on those two tiny parcels of land. We have many much larger parcels of land where they could do something that's closer to what they originally wanted to do.
Yeah.
I mean, but it seems like they desperately want to have that be in that location. It just seems like it's a hard spot for them, but I'm happy to meet with them. I don't know that they've looked at other alternatives, and they certainly have not made much of an effort on the aesthetic aspect. I mean, Pete and I were both at the meeting they had with the Legion, and, you know.
They got, obviously, they
got a pretty wide range of of acceptability in terms of architecture.
They've
but-
got they've got obviously willing landowners at those locations.
Yeah, that's why they're there, I think. And they're, I understand that
Obviously
they've,
offering them, more money than they could get for any kind of a traditional zoning permitted type of development, so it becomes a win-win, so to speak, from their standpoint.
Right. But I would encourage them to look at what the MSHPC is putting together with respect to the master plan and see what they might want to do would fit up there. I mean, there are other places in Medfield with a lot more room than the 9 acres they've selected. I mean, it's a nice location, in the corner there, in terms of visibility. Almost suggests a different use altogether, but happy to meet with them. And
And
Pete and I both go, as long as we have 48 hours notice, we can post the meeting and other people can come.
Yeah. Well, if you can send me some dates when you'd be available. I don't think we ought to be rushed into meeting with them. I think that if they want a meeting, fine, but we have a group of people that get together and you can't just set it up in a couple of days. So if it takes a week or two, fine.
so, what works for me, Mike, is either 8 in the morning or 7 at night, usually, on weekdays.
It's usually better for me too. I can go even earlier if you want.
Meeting if it's.
Absolutely.
You two are not together, would it still?
Oh, well, if the two of us went, it would be an open meeting.
Necessarily,
If only one of us went, it wouldn't have to be, no.
Yeah. 2 it would be, 2 selectmen it would be, other than that it would not be.
So then it would be.
Has to be a majority of a board, so.
The flip side is if it's not an open meeting, whoever's there doesn't have any authority to bind the town anyway, so it would just be a preliminary discussion.
Who was at the meeting that they spoke to the other night? I mean, at Dale Street, they said they had met with town officials.
They met with department heads, I think, probably Sarah and Mike and I don't know.
Police chief, fire chief, Chris, myself, you were
That
there,
was
Sarah.
months ago.
Yeah. And that's when they presented these new plans, the second version, second coming of junk. So,
And then they revised them again for the meeting of the Legion back on the 18th, whenever that was. I think that was subsequent to the meeting you had and supposedly incorporated input from town officials.
my input was not very polite, so.
I'm not sure they attended the same meeting as we did.
Pete?
Yes.
Mike, Pete, whoever. Have you sent this out loud to John Kelly and the other people involved? Why aren't you looking elsewhere in town?
I have not.
Okay, so that hasn't been presented to them directly.
And I don't know. It may not work at all.
I think I understand your reason why they're going to say no.
We have to be very careful of what we say, because we are supposed to be working with them, not against them. So for us to tell them go look elsewhere could be used against the town. So we're not going to say
By
that.
state regulations, are you saying that might?
They could use that as evidence that the town was an unwilling participant, so we're not going to.
And also, they've got contracts of some sort with landowners, so those are binding documents. We can't disregard that either.
And the answer may be, look, they're required to try and build something there, and they can't build it someplace else. And that's a fine answer to that question. But as I understand the agreement, it's the option is with the person, option to buy it.
Oh, I'm sure.
They're not bought it. Whether they're required, what efforts they're required to make to actually build something there. I don't remember anything like that in the agreements, but.
And we have a few irons in the fire that we're looking at for other sites that would give us an extension on the.
But not for them, I mean, for other potential projects,
Yeah.
right?
Of course, the problem you run into is if you say, we're not gonna put it there, put it somewhere else in town, then you're saying the people that live in that neighborhood, okay, you take it. So you also have to be careful in that regard too, we're not the arbiters of who puts what where, and we can't favor one neighborhood over another, if you know.
But it would be nice, I think, if you two both go, because then the public could participate as well.
I agree.
And I think the public would enjoy that.
If what?
I think they need as much
Enjoy
public
hearing
input
it.
as
Yeah,
they
it would be
can
nice.
get.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've certainly heard a lot from the public of the town.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything more on the 40B? Next item is discuss Environmental Partners Group, July 27 letter notifying Medfield of a balancing change order for the recent construction of the state hospital tank replacement.
Yeah, this is a contract. Mark has reviewed it. Basically, the Water and Sewer Board has decided that they want to explore other alternatives to building a treatment plant. One of the alternatives is to build a new well. And so they have asked their environmental partners to explore other potential sites for a well in town. And they narrowed, I think they started with 12 sites, they narrowed it down to 4. And from that, they have kind of honed in on one particular site. And it's the one I would have told them at the beginning that I thought was the most logical. It's the old State Hospital well field behind Colonial Road, behind the Hunt Club property, that the state gave us that land. So, what?
That's part of our negotiations for the cleanup.
Yes. So they are going to do, as part of this, they're going to do pump tests and water quality analysis and see if it's suitable and what the cost would be compared to the cost of building a treatment plant. So that would be the amendment.
Yep, okay. How about the informational, Mike? Anything there that you want to bring to people's attention?
I did, let's see.
Cherry sheet's pretty much the same.
Yeah,
I guess we got 100,000 more than last year or something?
Yeah, it was a little bit less than under the governor's original, or the Senate and House's original proposal. It didn't have anything to do with the big accounts. I think it had to do more with the some of the school choice and charter reimbursement accounts. But it's pretty much in line with what we thought. I'm preparing a budget estimate for fiscal 19, and I'll have those figures in there for you, along with copies of the cherry sheet at the next meeting. But it's, I did not estimate for next year that the budget would go up this state aid would go up very much, because, as you know, all you read in the paper these days is the state has a big budget deficit problem. So I think at this point to start assuming we're going to get a big jump next year would be a false hope. Now, maybe if I did hear last night the lottery was up, lottery for the first time passed $1 billion in profits, but they said it was almost $1 billion last year, so that may not be that big an increase. But they're asking you to vote to sign this contract amendment on that one. Oh, and the Wheelabrae to Millbury, it's kind of confusing because the rates for Harvey went up in January. Harvey's the recycling operator down at the transfer station. Wheelabrae is the incinerator. That's where the trash goes to, that incinerator along the Mass Pike. Their rates go up on the fiscal year. So we had a $2 rate increase in January, plus a $5 per trip increase in the transportation cost in January for Wheelabrae, for Harvey. And in Harvey's case, they pick up the recycled goods. So there is a transportation charge, and the price is now $22 as of January 1st. So it's gone from 10 to 20 to 22. It's gone up considerably.
Over what period of time?
2 years.
Oh.
So they did.
No market for recyclables right now.
Yeah,
Huh.
Glass is worth nothing. It's
Still cheaper to recycle it than to take it to the incinerator, apparently.
It's still as much cheaper.
Yeah,
There's
so we'll recycle then.
opportunity cost savings there. The Wheelabrae to Millbury rate went up 1.32%. I think it went from 60, it's in there, the sheet, I think from $66 to $66.70, something like that. But it's 1.32% increase, so that's
That
pretty
was a
reasonable.
consortium contract, a bunch of communities negotiated with them for a
Yeah,
long-term
like 20
contract.
towns or
20 years,
something.
yeah.
Mike, what, on the county tax, the 120,000, is that all we pay to the county every
Is that
year?
all we pay? Yes. They have an assessment, but they get revenues from other sources.
Right, from the,
From the registry.
From the registry,
And then
and
the
then the-
state rents the courthouses from them and
Yeah.
pays rent.
and they bill us for the Aggie students.
They bill extra over and above the tuition
Yep.
for that.
Yeah,
They
okay.
also have this revenue from the golf course supposedly,
Yep.
so.
But our main charge then is 120,000 to support Norfolk County.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. Now, people get confused. They'll think Norfolk County, and then they say Norfolk County Mosquito Control. They have nothing to do with each other. Norfolk
Right.
County Mosquito Control is an entirely separate group.
Yeah, it's not
And
part of the
They have an
county.
assessment that appears on the cherry sheet also, but it's a different, and I think that's up to about $60,000 now.
And then we have a $14,000 check from Selectric Energy Development. Is that an SREX?
Yes, that, believe it or not, that's the first monies we've received for the solar panel configuration at the treatment plant. That was for May and June of 2017. So we now we're waiting for 4 additional checks for fiscal 17. One of them, they said, should be in a couple of weeks. It looks like we'll be getting about at least $60,000 a year in SREC credits, and that goes on for 10 years.
For the solar at the wastewater treatment plant?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
so that money will go into the sewer enterprise fund, and it will not go to the general fund. Now, in addition to that money, they have experienced they think between 30 and 40% savings on their electricity from generating their own electricity. So it's more than covered the cost of the bond the first year. So.
Yeah, it was a good choice.
Now, at the end of 10 years, those SREC credits will disappear. You won't get any more. You'll just get the electric savings. That's why we structured the bond for that project for 10 years. So when the SREC credits disappear, the bonds will be paid for. So. And we'll still hopefully have the savings in electricity.
We should do some more of those deals. They're good deals.
Yeah, we will. We also have qualified for the public safety building. That'll be much smaller, but
Yep.
We will get some money back on that eventually too. It's like an auction. They sell these SREC credits like they were stocks, and the utilities buy them because utilities are required to purchase a certain percent of their energy from renewable sources. And since they don't have solar plants themselves, or they don't have wind turbines, they purchase these SREC credits, and that qualifies as their share of renewable resources.
Are the energy providers the only ones that are really buying the SRECs then?
As far as I know,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know who else what value they would have to anyone else.
Yeah, I don't need them.
No.
Anything else here you wanted to call people's attention, or Mark?
Yeah, as you're probably aware, the marijuana legislation passed. It's 75 pages. I'm waiting
I
for...
believe the commission is like 25 people.
Yeah. I did skim it. At this point, it doesn't even have, it's not even printed with the session laws yet because the governor just signed it. But at some point, and there's no rush, but with all the things we did to ensure that there would be no marijuana recreational sales in the town of Medfield, we're going to have to do one more, which is to have you do some kind of a resolution that affirms that, because this was one of the towns that voted against it, and therefore it's the Board of Selectmen now that have the authority to say no.
Oh, so because I had thought, okay, I had thought they had done that for towns that didn't want to have a vote. Now we have to do that too, even though we had a vote on it?
We've done everything but that, and there's some question on what the vote, again, the authority for the votes and all that sort of thing. So just to be sure, we'll do a resolution that recites, ratifies, confirms, And make no mistake about it, no marijuana, recreational marijuana sales. So.
You would think they would have put a sentence in there, grandfathering in all the towns that have, 100 towns or something voted in spring, as we did.
Did you say it was 75 pages? Maybe it's in there somewhere.
No.
Or that Nancy Pelosi said something, you have to pass it so you can find out what's in it. So.
All right.
Hey, there's one other thing I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that hearing for the driveway, common driveway, 331 North. That driveway will service the McLeod property and the Schmidt property. Right now, they are using a driveway between that white house and the barn up on North Street. It's just about a half mile for the Dover line. It's like an old farmhouse with a sign with a cow on it.
Yep. There's at least one more house in there, too.
Yes, and the original land subdivision that was prepared by Mr. Lewis provided a mutual driveway access out on the North Street beyond that White House. The owners of the White House have said at some point, if they decide to sell, they may want to prevent them from using that driveway because it would affect the sale of the value of the property at sale. So one of the houses is being sold. The buyer of the property wants to assure that they would have access. Their lawyers have said, don't buy the house unless you've got guarantee you've got access to it. So, makes sense. So this is what that's about. The way that land was subdivided, the town is so lucky to have that property kept the way it is. And I think anything we can do to help these people, we should do it. So.
And the buyers are apparently continuing the horse raising, so they need the ability to get good-sized vehicles for hay and horses.
They originally proposed it much wider, but they talked to Mo, and Mo it went over it with them, and they decided they could narrow it down somewhat, and it would be as obvious a driveway. I was a little concerned as it was something like over 100 feet, and I said somebody could come up that road at night and think that was the road.
So we should probably defer, we have this draft calendar, probably have to defer a discussion of it until Gus is back.
Yeah, and that's, I just put that together, and there's nothing sacred about it. Feel free to move it around. It'll change over time anyway, because some of the groups won't be able to make the dates.
The only thing we haven't done yet are our reappointments.
I'm working on that.
On boards and committees, and I know we heard from Jeremy that he's stepping down from the Water and Sewer Board. And so we'll have to figure out what to do.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I haven't heard that.
He said he was stepping down as chair. It wasn't clear whether he was stepping off the board.
All right.
At least it wasn't to me.
Okay. So, anyway, hopefully, to the extent we have openings, we can reach out to some of the folks who volunteered for all of our oversubscribed committees this year. Maybe get them on some of our undersubscribed.
Maybe we should just send out appointments to the...
Just let them know. You're considered for the next position.
Thank you for volunteering for the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. You're now...
If there is anyone that's interested in the Water and Sewer Board, though, there's a couple of major projects coming up. We could use some people with engineering.
Or numbers crunching.
Numbers crunching, financial background. So anyone that would be interested. They generally have been meeting mornings.
Thursday mornings.
And they meet maybe once a month, twice a month. So.
And I know we talked about this from time to time, Mike, but could you put together as well, maybe for that meeting with the Warrant Committee and the School Committee, sort of the 5-year projection on budgets and tax rate, so we can talk about that with them? Because one of the things we'll have to address with them is the School Committee's thoughts on timings for Dale Street and the rest of it. And that would be helpful to... It plays into what Gus had circulated on the town goals as well, I think.
Starting in 21, the school debt starts coming off in the school project, so that would be a big help if they could delay it till then. And it comes off over 3 years.
Right.
Along with a couple of other projects, a couple of water things come off, so. The 5-year projection is quite easy. We go up about 3 to 4% a year in our revenues.
I think it would be just helpful to give that to the school committee and the warrant committee, and
Yep.
they can see this is what we're looking at.
Yep.
You know.
Thanks for putting that together, Mike.
Well, it took me long enough. I apologize for taking so long to get here. Been asking that for months, but
And I will move that we adjourn.
I'll second that. Thanks for coming, everybody.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV, Community Shows.